In the heart of Moscow, where the bustling city meets the edge of the Siberian wilderness, the Moscow Zoo offered a brief escape from the urban chaos. Its enclosures housed creatures from across the globe: lions, tigers, and exotic birds, allowing visitors to experience the wild, all within the city limits. But in September 1999, what was meant to be a joyful family outing turned into a nightmare that would forever haunt those involved. This is the story of the brutal bear attack on 8-year-old Ivanka Dmitriev, a tragedy that not only devastated a family but shook an entire community to its core. You don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. On that fateful September day, Elena Dmitriev decided to take her 3 children on a long-promised visit to the zoo. Her oldest child, Ivanka, had been eagerly awaiting this trip for weeks. Bright, curious, and full of life, Ivanka was everything a mother could hope for in a child. She had a love for animals that could only be matched by the wonder in her eyes whenever she saw them in person or in books. Joining Ivanka were her younger twin brothers, Sergei and Mikhail, only 3 years old, who trailed after their mother and sister with wide-eyed stare. It was the perfect autumn day, cool, crisp air, and the sun shining just enough to keep the chill at bay. As they arrived at the zoo, the children rushed through the gates, their laughter filling the air as they pointed to the towering giraffes, majestic lions, and playful monkeys. Elena, always vigilant, kept a close eye on her brood, reminding them to stay close as they meandered through the winding paths of the zoo. It was a peaceful family outing, an ordinary day that would soon spiral into a tragedy beyond comprehension. As they approached the section of the zoo where the bears were kept, Ivanka was filled with excitement. Of all the animals, she had always been fascinated by bears: their size, their strength, their wildness. The enclosure was lined with thick iron bars, designed to keep the massive creatures at bay, while allowing visitors to observe them from a seemingly safe distance. The bears, pacing back and forth or lounging lazily, seemed oblivious to the people peering in at them. It was here, at this seemingly safe enclosure, that Ivanka's life would come to a horrifying end. Elena, distracted by the needs of her younger children, didn't notice when Ivanka wandered closer to the enclosure. The little girl was mesmerized by one particular bear, a hulking brown beast that seemed to be watching her as intently as she was watching it. Without realizing the danger, Ivanka pressed her face against the bars, trying to get a better look. In her innocent mind, the bear was just another fascinating creature, something to admire and maybe even connect with. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The bear, perhaps provoked by the proximity of the young girl, lunged at the bars with astonishing speed and ferocity. Its massive paws shot through the gap, its claws hooking onto Ivanka's small frame before anyone could react. There was no time for screams, no chance for escape. The bear dragged her through the bars with a strength and brutality that defied comprehension. Elena, hearing the commotion, turned in horror to see her daughter being pulled into the enclosure. Panic set in. People screamed, zoo staff rushed toward the scene, but the unimaginable had already begun. The bear, having pulled Ivanka through the bars, tore into her with a savage ferocity that left onlookers paralyzed with shock. The little girl, so full of life just moments before, was now at the mercy of a wild animal's primal instincts. Her screams echoed across the zoo, mixing with the horrified cries of those who witnessed the attack. Elena, in a state of disbelief and terror, rushed toward the enclosure, but there was nothing she could do. The zoo's security team tried to intervene, but it was already too late. The bear, having been driven into a frenzy by the attack, refused to release Ivanka. Attempts to scare the animal away were futile. In a matter of minutes, the little girl was gone, her small body torn apart by the relentless jaws and claws of the predator. The scene was one of unimaginable horror. Blood stained the ground inside the enclosure, a gruesome reminder of the life that had been taken so violently. Elena collapsed, her heartbroken screams piercing the air as bystanders tried in vain to comfort her. Sergei and Mikhail, too young to fully comprehend what had happened, clung to their mother, their small faces twisted in fear and confusion. The zoo, once a place of joy and wonder, had become a place of horror, forever marked by the tragedy that had unfolded there. In the days that followed, Moscow was gripped by grief and outrage. News of Ivanka's death spread quickly, the brutal details of the attack shocking, even those accustomed to the harsh realities of life in the city. How could something like this happen in a place meant for families, for children? How could a mother be forced to witness the unthinkable, the violent death of her child right before her eyes? For Elena, the grief was unbearable. In the weeks following the attack, she could barely function, consumed by guilt and sorrow. She replayed the events of that day over and over in her mind, questioning every decision, every moment. Could she have done something differently? Could she have saved her daughter? These questions haunted her, leaving her unable to find peace. The zoo, facing intense public scrutiny, was forced to confront its own negligence. How could a child have been allowed to get so close to such a dangerous animal? Why were the bars spaced in a way that allowed something so terrible to happen? These questions led to a series of investigations, and in the aftermath, significant changes were made to the zoo's enclosures and safety protocols. But for Ivanka's family, these changes came too late. Nothing could bring their little girl back. Ivanka's death also sparked a wider conversation about the ethics of zoos and the safety of keeping wild animals in captivity. Some argued that zoos were necessary for education and conservation, while others questioned whether the risks to both humans and animals were too great. In the wake of the tragedy, many called for stricter regulations and oversight to prevent something like this from ever happening again. Elena's life, and the lives of her remaining children, were forever changed. The image of her daughter being dragged away by the bear haunted her dreams, and the sound of Ivanka's screams echoed in her mind long after the noise of the zoo had faded away. The twins, though young, were deeply affected by the loss of their sister. They would grow up in the shadow of that day, their family's happiness forever tainted by the memory of the sister they barely had time to know. For years, the Dmitriev family struggled to move forward. Grief counseling, support from loved ones, and time all helped to some extent, but the pain never truly went away. The loss of a child, especially in such a horrific and public way, is something that no parent can ever fully recover from. Elena, once full of life and love, became a shadow of her former self, haunted by the tragedy that had stolen her daughter from her. Ivanka's story is a tragic reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of nature, even in a place as controlled and contained as a zoo. It serves as a stark warning about the dangers that can lurk even in the most seemingly safe environments, and the importance of vigilance, particularly when it comes to protecting our children. Today, as we remember Ivanka Dmitriev, we also remember the lesson her death taught us, that life is precious, and sometimes, in the blink of an eye, it can be ripped away in the most unimaginable of ways. Her memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved her, a bright light extinguished far too soon by the brutal forces of nature. The tragedy didn't just alter the lives of Ivanka's family, it sent shockwaves through the Moscow community and the world beyond. Parents who had once brought their children to the zoo with joy in their hearts now approached with caution, the memory of the horrific attack impossible to shake. Zoos around the globe tightened their safety measures in response, recognizing the fine line they walked between education and danger. But for those closest to Ivanka, the changes were bittersweet. While stricter safety protocols would protect others in the future, nothing could erase the haunting memory of that terrible day, nor could it ever bring back the innocent life so tragically lost.